You are listening to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I'm helping women rediscover a migraine-free life. Today I'm talking about a common question that I get. My doctor says I'm healthy. How can anyone healthy feel this poorly? I'm really excited to talk about this. This is something that I hear a lot. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of women in the Facebook group on a free migraine consult call that I offer. And this is something that I hear really frequently. You know, my doctor keeps saying that I'm healthy, that there's nothing wrong with me. How could somebody that's healthy feel as poorly as I do? And it really gets to the point for women with chronic migraines where they almost wish that something would come back on the lab work or on the imaging. In conventional medicine, they can't treat you unless you have a diagnosis. We talked about this on the second podcast, actually. This is how conventional medicine works. It is all around disease management. And so they treat disease. They do not restore people to a state of health. And so in order to treat a disease, you have to have a diagnosis of a disease. I can imagine if you were having a gallbladder issue that you were having a lot of abdominal pain, bloating, difficulty eating, things like that. But so you know there's something going on in there, but if they can't find it, they can't help you, right? People feel unheard, they feel dismissed. This is where people leave the doctor's office crying, literally in tears. And who can blame them? Because in conventional medicine, if they can't come to a diagnosis, they can't help you. So I really wanted to tackle this because it's really, really important that people understand the mindset that your doctor has when you go in for the visit and contrast that with how I do my work. Okay, so, just to summarize what people are experiencing over and over again, just like you did, right? You're having some symptoms. Things do not feel right. You're having chronic migraines. You're having to overuse your abortive medication. You're having rebound phenomenon. You're getting the migraine hangover. You have a lot of other symptoms too, probably fatigue, can't sleep through the night, anxiety. Who wouldn't have anxiety after they've been through all of this? Any number of other symptoms. And so you go into the doctor and they run a bunch of tests, a bunch of blood work, send you for imaging, and then you're told, good news. There's nothing wrong with you. You're healthy. Everything came back normal. And so women have been going through this. I mean, my typical client is in her 50s or 60s and has had migraines for 3 decades. And so people have had this experience over and over and over again. People go into the ER, they go from neurologist to neurologist, doctor to doctor, just desperate for someone to finally run different blood work, take different imaging, ask different questions, desperate for somebody to give them an answer, what's wrong? And what they're told over and over again is, oh, you're healthy. You're healthy. You just feel like death warmed over, but you're healthy. So let's ask the question, what is health? Right? So in your doctor's eyes, you're healthy if nothing comes back on the blood work or the imaging. If your symptoms are enough where they can come to a diagnosis, right? Your symptoms were not checking all the boxes for the symptoms of gallstones or gallbladder inflammation. And so it was a little ambiguous according to the symptoms that you were experiencing. So when they ran the imaging, they couldn't find anything, so they told you there was nothing wrong. They couldn't quite get that diagnosis. So for your doctor, health is the absence of an official diagnosed disease, right? I mean, you don't sleep through the night, you're fatigued, you have migraine, hangover, brain fog, rebound headaches. None of that is really going to rise to the level of a diagnosed disease. And so if they cannot make a diagnosis based on your symptoms and based on the lab work and the imaging, you are quote unquote healthy. Now, that's not my definition of health. So, this is, I'm going to make a real bold statement here. We are in a state of health when we feel good. Let that sink in. We are in a state of health when we feel good, right? When we feel well physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually, right? There are four aspects to our being. We are unbelievably complex organisms here, us humans. And so we have four aspects to our being, and when we feel well in those four aspects, we are in a state of health. Now, notice that I said state of health rather than healthy, okay? Because this is another thing that we kind of use this word healthy as if it's a destination that we get to that we never leave, right? Whereas in a state of health, I think is a better description of what's actually going on here because we can get there some days and then some days we feel a little bit worse. Not every day is a fantastic day, right? So some days we feel a little bit better than other days, right? Some days we are closer to that perfect state of health than we are on other days. A lot of people confuse their physical fitness level with their state of health, and those two things are not equivalent. I've worked with clients who have been running marathons while they had chronic migraines, right? So I've never run a marathon, never even come close. I'm not a runner. But, right? So people can have a very high level of, say, cardiovascular fitness, but not be in a state of health, right? Because they're not feeling well physically. Okay. And so the other thing too is we discount how we are feeling mentally and emotionally or spiritually, right? It's like, well, if the physical body, due to the lab work and the imaging, checks out, right? But we can't sleep through the night. We have a lot of anxiety. We have low mood. People discount that, right? We discount how we feel mentally and emotionally quite a bit as well. There's a stigma with this, right? If it's quote unquote in our head, right? Or another thing that people are told by family members, you're causing this. Just calm down. My goodness, you're going to give yourself a migraine. You're so upset. So there's sort of stigma, number one. I mean, already pain conditions, when people have physical pain, there is a lot of stigma around having physical pain because you're weak, you need to tough it out. This type of stigma when people have physical pain conditions, right? Now, let alone if there's a mental or emotional aspect to something, that's even more stigmatized, right? Now it's like all in your head, it's not even real, quote unquote. Now, one thing that is true is that we can have things that start out on the mental and emotional side of ourselves that we feel in the physical body. So if we have pain on the mental or emotional side of ourselves, we can feel that with mental and emotional symptoms, say anxiety, right? Like waking up at 3 in the morning and worrying. Okay. So that would be, we're experiencing pain mentally and emotionally, and we then experience that as anxiety in the middle of the night, not able to sleep, right? But we can also experience that mental and emotional pain through physical pain in the body or physical symptoms. And I think most people can experience this, right? What's very typical when people have anxiety, they feel something in their abdomen. We even say butterflies in the stomach, right? There's that uneasy feeling in the abdomen when we have anxiety. So that is true around how we experience our symptoms, but this is not what people mean when they say this is all in your head, right? Or, for goodness sakes, just calm down here. You're going to give yourself a migraine, right? I've had people tell me that even their neurologist has told them this. So when we are in a state of health, we feel good. Okay. And so we have the energy, the energy level to make it through our day. We're not conking out at 2 in the afternoon after lunch. We aren't having symptoms like the symptoms that come with a migraine or other symptoms. So, my clients, it's very, very rare that I work with someone who doesn't have other symptoms than migraines. Okay, so, and then also when we're in a state of health, the functions of the body that we don't have any control over, they work well too, and we don't notice them. So, things that we don't have control over is like our digestion. When we're in a state of health, we eat food, we poop, and we don't feel anything in between. We're not, we can swallow our food, we have a good appetite, we're not having heartburn or rumbling and pain and all this other kind of stuff. When we're in a state of health, we sleep through the night, right? We don't have any control over our sleep. You can't will yourself to sleep. If only we could, right? People wouldn't have the problems that they have with sleeping. Other things that we don't have control over are, say, when we get up out of a chair. When we stand up, an amazing cascade happens in the body to pump the blood up into the brain as we change position. If our body doesn't do that, the blood doesn't stay up there as we change position, and then we feel dizzy, lightheaded, things start to get a little dark, right? So when we're in a state of health, we can stand up and we just go about what we're going to do, right? We don't have this big upset. So when we are in a state of health, the body is functioning, the physical body is doing what it's supposed to do automatically. The things that we don't have control over just hum away and we don't notice them. We don't feel things physically when we are in a state of health. We don't have symptoms. And then on the mental and emotional side, we feel well as well. We're not plagued by anxiety. We're not plagued with low mood, lack of motivation. We're not irritable, right? Not that every day is, sunshine and moonbeams, right? Everybody has up and down with their mood, but in general, right, our mental and emotional state is stable. And that's what being in a state of health means. So you can, what the medical community has devised, particularly over the past 80 years, are all of these elaborate tests, blood tests and imaging, etc. But what those are designed to do is to determine a diagnosis. Remember, they need that diagnosis in order for them to treat you. And so the blood work has not been designed, the imaging has not been designed to assess your state of health. It has been designed to determine whether or not you have a diagnosable condition. And so, what things are designed to do, that's what they give us. So we're running all of these tests and doing all of this imaging to look at the things that we don't want, right? We don't want the disease. We don't do anything. Your doctor doesn't do anything to measure what you want to achieve, which is health, right? I mean, this is a known phenomenon, right? What you measure, you get more of, right? What you look for, you get more of, right? So what we should be doing, we call it a healthcare system. It's a disease care system, and everything is oriented around the disease. Every measurement that's taken is focused on the disease. There's no measurements that are taken that are focused on health. And people will say, "Well, I'm healthy because of my habits." Right? I eat healthy. I go for a walk every day. I don't get myself angry on social media, and they say, people will say to me, I should be healthy because I do those things. And so this is the thing, like, again, there's this expectation that we just kind of do a few things and we're going to be in a state of health too. And all of this reinforces the fact that if you don't feel well, it's because you're defective, broken, faulty genetics, bad wiring, right? Because everybody's running all these tests and things come back fine and the imaging doesn't show they have a tumor and they're eating well and going for a walk every day. I quote unquote should be healthy. I'm not. Therefore, there's something wrong with me. I'm doomed, defective, etc., etc., etc. No one looks at the conditions for health, the symptoms of health. That's what I look for when I'm working with my clients. So, first of all, there are three things that we have to do to restore and maintain our health. And so, these three things are number one, we have to get the nutrients to every cell in the body. Number two, we have to clear metabolic wastes and toxins. And number three, we have to restore our resiliency and vitality that keeps us in a state of health or homeostasis. Okay. When we don't feel well, we are going to have blockers or missing pieces within those three areas. And when we have blockers or missing pieces in those three areas, there are telltale symptoms that people have. Sometimes it will even come up on tests. Okay. But I will be honest with you, even in my world, there are not a lot of tests to measure health because this is not the paradigm that we're living in, right? You said you've had a paradigm shift here, right? Well, the paradigm that we're all living in is this disease focused paradigm. So a lot of people see other naturopathic doctors, functional medicine practitioners, chiropractors. There is a very lucrative, it's probably not a multi billion dollar business, but I'm sure it's a multi million dollar business of what is called specialty labs. Okay, so you have sort of conventional labs or standard labs. This is the blood work that your medical doctor orders for you. Okay, and then you have this whole other subset of labs in the quote unquote alternative medicine space or natural medicine space that are called specialty labs. And these will do testing of your adrenal hormones or your food sensitivities or your neurotransmitters. Okay. Most medical doctors are going to call these labs trash, bunk, quackery. And they're not trained on that lab work. Okay. They're trained on the conventional, you know, poke your vein with a needle blood work. Okay. That's what they're trained in. So the alternative medicine industry has developed a whole nother set, multi-million dollar business model of these alternative labs. And so when you go into a natural medicine practitioner, many times they're going to order these types of labs. I will be honest with you, they are still disease oriented. Okay. And so I have been trained on all of this lab work too. I have a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician. I know all of the toolkit. So, just in case anyone's not aware of our training, just as an aside, to become a licensed naturopathic physician, you have to go through 4 years of naturopathic medical school. You have to go through 2 years of clinical training. You have to pass board exams and we learn all of the conventional medicine, diagnosis, treatments, all of the pharmaceuticals. I can write prescriptions for pharmaceuticals. I can order blood work and imaging for people. I can do everything that a primary care physician can do as a licensed naturopathic physician. But then I'm also trained on all of the quote unquote alternative medicine stuff, if you will. Okay. I had a very wise mentor during my training, and we were in a class and we were discussing neurotransmitter testing. This is one of those specialty tests. Okay. Many of you listening, if you have migraines, you might have gotten one of these tests. And so he was very wise, and we were going through the tests because, again, I'm trained on all of these tests. I can order all of these tests. And he said a very crucial statement. He said, you really don't need to run the test because if you understand the physiology of the brain, if you understand the biochemistry of the brain, if you understand the role that the neurotransmitters play in the brain, which we learned, which I do, he said, if you understand all that, you can tell by the symptoms that the body is generating what the neurotransmitter levels are. You really don't need the test. This was a real eye opener for me because most people in the alternative medicine space are never going to tell people this because this is a multi-million-dollar industry, this specialty testing. So, sort of the stereotype of going to a functional medicine doctor, a chiropractor, naturopathic doctor, right? A practitioner in my space. The stereotype is that when you go into that type of practitioner, you're going to spend $1,000 to $5,000 on specialty tests. Neurotransmitter testing can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Okay. So I started to question this was when I was a student. And then I did 2 years of clinical training where you're under supervision of a doctor. And so I've saw 1,000 patients just in my clinical training. You listen to someone's symptoms, you order testing, you see what the testing comes back. And over again, I saw, yep, my mentor was right. The symptoms that the body is generating, right? The things that you feel, Marion, that you can tell your doctor about. If I understand the physiology of the body and the biochemistry of the body, I can tell what the specialty lab results are going to be. Occasionally, I will run these tests because occasionally, we do need the data, particularly when people are coming off of medication. Then it can be very helpful to have data because the medication is manipulating the biochemistry. And so when people are coming off the medication, sometimes, yes, I do need to know, okay, where are the levels of such and such, right? Because then that can guide me to advise the client. Okay. But when I was first in practice, I've been in practice 11 years now. When I was first in practice, I would order I probably ordered less testing than my colleagues would order because I had been mentored in the way that I was, but I still ordered more testing than I do now. I do not routinely order testing. And so, a lot of people, when they reach out to me, they've been kind of burned by this in the past where they think that I'm going to be ordering, the first thing we're going to do is order $3,000 worth of testing. And that's not what I do because it's not necessary. The symptoms that people are experiencing are going to give me the same picture that the specialty testing is going to give me. And some practitioners will say, well, I like to order the test because I have something in black and white that I can show the client. But for me, I feel bad charging for something that is obvious to me by me just listening to them, right? It should be my job. Like some practitioners say, well, if the patient has it in black and white on a test result, it'll motivate them to follow through with the recommendations. Whereas I see that as my role to help understand people that, understand the clients that I'm working with and understand, what motivates them. How are they motivated? How do they prefer to do things? And then adjust my recommendations so that they're inherently motivated to follow through and that it's also something that's going to work for them and their lifestyle and their family, etc. I'm focused on what does my client need to do to get back into a state of health. I'm not focused on their disease. I'm not focused on their symptoms in the sense of like, okay, I'm going to give this natural substance, this natural supplement for this symptom. That's not what I'm focused on. What I'm focused on is, okay, I know that we as human beings, if we have all three of these buckets full, and again, those three buckets, I call them the three principles. First principle, getting the nutrients to every cell in the body. Second principle, clearing metabolic waste material and toxins. And the third principle, restoring our resiliency and vitality. If we fill up those three buckets, our innate ability to heal is going to kick in, and we are going to start feeling better. And what is missing from the buckets? Do we have a hole in the bottom of the bucket? So, right, because we can fill a bucket, but if there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket, we'll be continuously filling, right? So sometimes, so with my work with my clients, it's identifying, okay, where are there holes in the buckets and how do we fill them? What's missing from the buckets and what's the best way to get that replenished? And are there blockers that are going to prevent us from filling up the buckets? Well, this is a blocker, right? If we have poor digestion, then we can't get anything into the body. That's how we get stuff in, is through our digestive tract. And so if we have a digestive tract that's not functioning properly, then we've got a blocker, right? I'm trying to fill the bucket. I'm trying to fill that first bucket to get the nutrients to every cell in the body. But if I have a blocker, I can't get anything in. I can't fill the bucket. It just boggles my mind. And this is a critique of my own industry, right? My own colleagues in the natural medicine space. They don't, some people have a little bit of a concept of these three principles that are required to restore health. Not many, I'll be honest with you, but some people will have a little bit of a concept of this, but they don't identify blockers to clearing, to filling these buckets. So they just keep filling and doing all this stuff and just try to keep filling it, and they don't address the blocker that's covering the top of the bucket, or they don't realize that there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket. On the first two principles, so the first principle, getting the nutrients to every cell in the body, which is more than just our digestion. There are other pieces too, because don't forget, we've got to eat the nutrients, we've got to get the nutrients out of the food, and then we have to circulate the nutrients to every cell. Okay, so that first principle is several pieces. Okay. The second principle is clearing metabolic waste material that we ourselves generate, and then also the toxins that we are exposed to in the environment. The food supply, the water supply, the air supply, the medications that we take are toxic. You can imagine how full that bucket gets. But these first two principles are affecting the physical body. Okay. Our cells are not going to function properly if they don't have the nutrients that they need and they're swimming in trash. Okay. Nobody's going to feel good if that's the case. And that's taking place on the physical aspect of ourselves within the physical body. The third principle of restoring our resiliency and vitality, there are things that we can do on the physical side to fill that bucket up, but then this is primarily on the mental and emotional side. We have mental and emotional habits or dynamics that are like a hole in the bottom of the bucket, or that are preventing us, blocking us from filling that bucket up. And these are, when I say mental and emotional habits, these are not things like yoga or meditation or those types of things. Those are actually physical habits. Okay. This is a big misconception that meditation is a mental and emotional habit. It's actually a physical habit. Okay. So, this third principle, we can have a hole in the bottom of the bucket. We can be blocking ourselves from filling that bucket due to things on that mental and emotional side. Okay. So each client's journey, each woman's journey to fill those buckets is going to be very unique to her, definitely. It's most unique on that third bucket. But even the first two, you have to have the right solution for you. But particularly on that third bucket, you're going to have the most individualized journey. like I said before, we can experience physical pain or physical symptoms because of things that are within the mental and emotional side of us. And so, yes, it may be trauma for some people. So one thing that's very, very common amongst women who are migraine sufferers is a tendency towards being a perfectionist. Okay. Type A personality. Okay. Normally, this is used as a derogatory comment. Oh, you're so type A, right? I don't think it's derogatory. To me, it's somebody that likes to get things done properly, is conscientious, cares to do it well. Can you tell that I fit this criteria too? So this is near universal. I can think of one client I've had over the years that was a type A personality. It's nearly a universal personality characteristic amongst us women who are prone to migraines. So there's a positive aspect to the type A personality, right? We usually accomplish a lot in our lives because we're pretty driven and conscientious and want to do a good job. So we do a good job on things. Usually it makes us pretty successful. But there's a sort of like a little dark side of the coin. The other side of the coin is a little tarnished, okay? Because it can be difficult for us to do what we need to do for ourselves. Can you relate to that one? Putting ourselves last, right? So, if we are putting ourselves last all the time and we're not doing what we need to do to take care of ourselves, we're got a little hole in the bottom of that third bucket. But here's the critical piece, okay? It's not that I just tell my clients, "Oh, well, you need to put yourself first. Let's have you put yourself first, Mary." And then Mary says, "Oh, wow, Dr. Leslie, I never thought of that before. Let me start doing that. I'm going to put myself first from today forward." And it's really irritating when people say this. "Oh, well, just put yourself first and all your problems will be solved," right? But there's something within that's very unique to all of us, right? There's something that I had to discover within myself, a little bit of a hurt, a little bit of an insecurity, a little bit of a fear that I had about myself that prevented me from taking care of myself, right? Like, not right, we're never going to put ourselves first all of the time, right? But put myself first enough so that I wasn't draining my vitality out of that third bucket. I had my own little fear, little insecurity, little trauma, a little bit of a ding that was preventing me from doing that. You've got your own little thing there, right? The little thing that when somebody says, "Well, Mary, you just need to put yourself first," there's a little "yeah, but" in there all the time, right? So, in order to actually quote unquote put ourselves first, right? We have to get into what is that little hurt, that little trauma, that little ding, that little insecurity, that little fear that is driving us, even though we know we shouldn't be doing this, right? We all do things that we know, I really shouldn't be doing this, right? Until you get into that and uncover that and bring that to the surface. Just somebody telling you not to do it, gosh, if only that worked, I wouldn't have any problems, right? Right? You meditating on it, right? That's not going to do it, right? If only meditation worked, if only prayer worked, right? We have to get in there. What is it under there putting that little hole and draining my vitality out? And so you can imagine how individualized this is for everybody, right? There's some common themes, but it's really, really specific to each person. These make up our little fears, our little insecurities, our sometimes our big traumas, right? These are big holes in the bottom of that third bucket, our vitality bucket. And so we can't fill that bucket up if there's a hole in the bottom. we've got to patch those up so that we can get that bucket filled. And to do this, you don't have to relive your trauma. You don't have to re-traumatize yourself. It's not an agonizing, wrenching ordeal. It's not therapy. This is another really interesting thing that I have discovered over the years, is that the vast majority of therapists, they don't understand the connection between what we experience mentally and emotionally and what we experience physically, right? For a therapist, they're just like all in the mental and emotional space. They're not in the physical space at all. And then most doctors are just in the physical space. They're not in the mental and emotional space at all, right? All three aspects are all complicated, tangled up together within us. They're not separate. And so what I do is not therapy either. The way that I help people identify what is that little tarnished side of the coin for you. And it could be perfectionism, could be a number of things. I'm just using perfectionism as an example because it's so common. But it could be any number of things. How I do that is something that I've developed over the years through my own journey with this. I had to figure this out on my own. I didn't have anybody to help me because, frankly, nobody really looks at this. So I kind of muddled through on my own. And then once I realized it was a factor for myself, then I became really, really interested in this. And over time, as I worked with more and more patients and clients, I realized, oh, wow, this isn't something that just happened to me. This is happening with everybody, right? Even though it's unique for everybody, this aspect is universal. And it's a big part of the healing process that's missed. You'll never get this in a prescription. You'll never get this in a natural supplement, that's for sure. And this is why I don't work with men with migraines, because their third bucket and the holes in the bottom of their buckets are very, very different than the holes in the bottom of our buckets as women. And so this is why I don't work with men. Somebody else is going to have to help men with migraines because I'm very, very specialized in helping women patch those holes up. And it's a different process for men. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. And before you go, please subscribe to this podcast. And also, do you know someone who would appreciate getting this information? If so, please share it with them. And if you would like to stay connected, please join our free Facebook group, Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar, ND. You can type that into the Facebook search box and we will come up. Or you can go to healingmigrainesnaturally.com and we will redirect you there. And again, if you are a woman suffering from chronic migraines, please reach out. I do offer a free migraine consultation call. You can book that on my website, drlesliecaesar.com. That's drleslieCisar.com.